I'll just start off with a little introduction. My name is Annika Dolphin, and I'm joined tonight with my co-host Darcy Douglas. Darcy is a blog writer and events director here at Textbook Ventures, and I'm head of community at Textbook Ventures. We've got some really interesting panelists here tonight that I'd just like to introduce. We've got Abhi Maran, who is an investment analyst at Folklore Ventures. We've got Clare Birch, who is an investment associate and scientist in residence at Blackbird Ventures. We're also joined tonight by Sally Yu, who's an investor at King River Capital, and finally Ludweenah Graham, who is head of platform at Galileo Ventures. So I'm sure we're going to get some really interesting conversations tonight. And if you're a first-time attendee, I'd just like to talk a bit more about what Textbook Ventures is. So we're a non-for-profit that's providing tailored support for student entrepreneurs through our events, digital content, and community. And like I said, I'm joined here tonight by Darcy Douglas, who is our head of events at Textbook, as well as blog writer for us. And at the end of the event, we will have a short Q&A session with the Slido code if there are any questions or discussion points. So I'd like to hand it over to Darcy to kick off the evening.
Awesome, welcome everybody. So let's start off with this fun one, Peter Thiel style. So your answer can be in the context of anything. But what's an important truth very few people agree with you on? Maybe we'll start off with Abhi.
Pretty spicy question to start off with, hey? I think from my perspective, working in VC, we're sort of bombarded with tech stories every day, and you sort of think that innovation is happening on a pretty fast pace, but I think it's actually a lot slower than what we perceive it to be. I think a lot of innovation is literally just sort of copying things from different sectors and different economies and pasting it wherever you are. And so going from 0 to 1 is like the hardest thing most people will do in their lives, and not a lot of people are equipped to actually do it. And so, yeah, I think that's my contrarian take for this tonight.
I'll jump in here. I think my take on this is that I'd say my view is that this question is actually not a great question, which is probably my contrarian view, is that when it comes to really important issues in life, whether it be climate change or like female empowerment, I think a lot of people have pretty strong views, and I'm not sure my, contrarian view is actually that contrarian. I feel like there's people who sit on both sides, and that there'd be a lot of people that sit on those sides. So, but an unpopular opinion, I don't like oysters, so apparently that's quite unpopular.
It's a real shame. I think oysters are great, but I respect it. I totally respect it. The one that I used to say for this was that actually I think that we're going to go back to in-person work. I didn't really buy the all work is going to go remote. We're never going to be back in the office kind of take. But that seems to have been that's not really an unpopular opinion anymore. So I think in this space, in the startup space, I tend to get I have a real chip on my shoulder about people saying that you should just quit uni and drop out immediately at the first glint of something promising. I tend to think, especially in the science and the I guess deeper tech space, there is a lot of value to be had from developing really deep understanding and the maturity that comes with a degree. But and I really get a bee in my bonnet when I see people saying that Twitter is free university. So that's my unpopular opinion, especially in the startup space.
That's a good one. I think mine is probably not as deep as that one. It's people just don't know how to recycle, and it really grinds my gears. And I think that's the mainstream population. So people in, I would say tech and startups are very aware of it. Maybe the new generation, but I find myself getting super irritated when I go to the recycle bin and there's food in with containers and stuff. Anyway, that's the thing.
Very cool. Some very interesting thoughts there. Great to hear from you all. So the second one is, with each of you coming from such different career paths, what has been your journey into venture capital? Did Sally want to start us off perhaps?
Sure, and definitely no shade, by the way. I enjoyed that question, just I don't know how to answer, so that was my version. So I guess I might start off from university. So I joined uni. My favorite subjects in high school were mathematics, economics, and biology. So I was thinking about, what's the best thing to study. So I landed in commerce. I thought about studying mathematics as well, but I think I was lucky to land a scholarship, so I ended in the commerce path. So it was a really traditional path for me. I started at Goldman Sachs as an investment banking analyst, worked there for 4 years. But actually I first heard about VC career from Textbook Ventures when I was back in uni, and this is back in 2017. So thanks to Textbook Ventures for, introducing me to venture. And I thought, this is a really interesting job. But back then I'd already accepted, I guess, a graduate role, and it was, definitely a question for me. It's something I really wanted to enter further on in my career, and I guess I luckily made the move 6 months ago.
Finished uni. I did undergraduate science at university. I was planning on jumping into a research career. That's really where I kind of started to direct myself in, specifically in computational chemistry. I did my honors in quantum simulation for chemistry, which is incredibly different to finance. So I was planning on doing a PhD. I was working as the first employee at a charity that provides STEM resources to Indigenous and remote communities in Australia, and kind of wrangling momentum there. And I had basically in front of me a suite of options, and I had no idea what to do. So I asked for advice from some people I trusted, got handed along my first sort of networking chain, and ended up talking to Michael Tollo at Blackbird. Tollo was basically like, tell me what you want to do for the next 2 to 3 years of your life, which was the exact opposite of what I wanted to hear. I really wanted someone to just tell me what to do. And I came back to him and I was like, look, I don't know what I want to do. I'm really fascinated by the startup space for XYZ reasons, but I don't know one that I would want to go into. So maybe I could try this VC thing for 6 months and see how it goes. And he was like, yeah, you're going to need more than 6 months. Let's explore a role for you at Blackbird. I came in as an intern, as our scientist in residence, in a role that was really perfectly suited to me, but also required me to really define the boundaries of the role. Which again was perfectly suited to me and to what I wanted to do. And I really thrived, and I found like a real home in the people here in particular. I think Blackbird is filled with very smart, very kind people, and it's pretty amazing in that sense. And then when the opportunity for a full-time associate role came up, I did not apply until my boss was like, have you applied, on the day that the applications were due. Like a few hours before they were due. And then when I said no, he told me to. So I did that. I would say, like, overall, the summary is just taking opportunities as they came, and probably sheer dumb luck. But it's been a pretty interesting journey so far, and it's been a pretty interesting learning curve. And I'm loving it.
Awesome. Did you want to go next, Abhi?
Sure. So I think I've been interested in tech and investing as long as I can possibly remember. Like both my parents used to work for startups over in Silicon Valley. Like, I just always been interested in reading about it. So I would read stories about founders, would always play with like the latest gadgets and that sort of thing. And then in uni, went and studied finance, wanted to get into startups. And this was back in probably mid 2018. And to be honest with you, like the startup scene back then was like pretty underdeveloped in Oz. Like there were a few big names, but largely, a lot of early stage companies. And so for me, being fresh out of uni, having studied finance, which is a pretty basic degree, didn't really see myself fitting into any of the startups at that stage, and didn't know what I could do from an entry level perspective. So I ended up working at a corporate company called Cambridge Associates, where I sort of designed and built bespoke portfolios for large institutions. So I worked with, some family offices, charities, that sort of thing, anyone who had 100 million to over 4 billion in assets under management. So did that for a couple of years, and then was probably getting disillusioned with it. Startup scene was pretty developed, start of 2021. And so ended up cold DMing people on LinkedIn, like founders and operators, and ended up getting my next role at a early stage fintech called Upstreet. So did product and biz ops there for a short stint before jumping across to Folklore. I think start of June last year. Yeah, so nearly a year since I joined VC. It's been pretty awesome.
Awesome. And do you want to finish this up, Libby?
Yeah, so I probably had a slightly non-traditional path. I dropped out of uni because I didn't know what I really wanted to do. Started with Shoes of Prey back in 2015. And so that was an interesting roller coaster ride, but so much to learn from just as an operator, and then like growing a team in a startup environment. So that was interesting. And then worked with a few 0 to 1 startups before moving over to Koala. in strategy and ops. And as I was doing that, I was just thinking, like, do I go into a founder sort of position and like start my own startup, or do I go into VC? And I didn't think of an idea that I really loved and kind of stuck to it. And then I thought I might as well just like help other founders. And at the time I was already growing a community of founders and interested in that 0 to 1 space. And so naturally, I think I just gravitated towards VC. I think along the way, I also didn't know what the industry was about. I had a few people that were like, yeah, I think you'd be really good at this. Like, you're great with founders, you understand the ops. And then I went to a Textbook Ventures event actually, and it had like Sam Wong, Alicia, I think it was like Sybil, and it was like women in VC, like back in the day, which was so rare. And I was like, yeah, this is really cool. And they're very smart and interesting people. And I do want to do this. And then so, yeah, moved on to Antler Accelerator, which helped me sort of get to know founders. And then now Galileo, and that's like a really good breadth of like ops, investments, and founder support.
All right, so I'll take over for the next question. And I'd just like to really demystify the space and set the scene for the remaining questions. Could one or two of you explain in your own words what venture capital is? Does anyone want to start off?
Sure, I can try. I think firstly, it looks different for every firm and for every person, really. I think you sort of find your fit. A lot of it is like relationship driven, and that's like relationship with founders, other investors, operators in the space. And so I think a lot of people think about it as like a core investment role, like maybe more maths heavy or stats heavy. But I think, like that might be true for later stage firms, but at least in the early stage, which is what I've been exposed to, a lot of it is, getting to know founders over time, and effectively when you invest in them or you back them, it's a 10-year relationship. So it's super important to just get to know them really well, and be comfortable with who you're investing in, basically.
And Sally, do you want to maybe explain how venture capital differed from your role in investment banking? Kind of what was so different about venture capital from investment banking? If you want to lead on from that.
Yeah, sure. I think venture, first of all, one hand would definitely be on this social side. So I think as part of venture, you really want to meet the people in the ecosystem around you, whether it's the most exciting startups, other founders around you, anyone who's really interested in the tech space. So I think we tend to attend a lot more events and try to really get to know each person, not just like the company as a whole on a really personal basis. So that's something I found quite different. And personally, I really enjoyed it, and it's one of the reasons I joined venture. And then I think also, if you think about it from the research or analytical standpoint, I'd say you look at a lot more companies and at varying degrees of, I guess, depth. I'd say the financial modeling is very different. So you're not looking at a publicly listed company with years and years of records of, their P&L balance sheet. Here, some of the companies might be pre-revenue stage, they're super early. So instead of focusing on a balance sheet, you're really trying to understand, what's the motivation here? What's the grand vision? What might the market look like? How can they capture it? What's the strategy? So they're focused on, potentially more qualitative things, but also you do some financial modeling sometimes. So today I was looking at a small fundamental build-up model, and I was looking at comparable companies and looking at what multiples are done at. So you do a little bit of that, but you concentrate on really different things. I'd also say that the structure is really different. As you all might know, investment banking is quite hierarchical in a sense, like every project, there's a managing director, there's a vice president, there's an associate, there's an analyst, there's a few teams working on it. There might be up to 20 people on a deal at the same time, whereas VC, the investment team, we only have 5-6 people in our investment team, and we don't all focus, on the same part of a deal. So I think the structure is a lot more flat. So you have a lot more runway and responsibilities, even as a junior analyst or associate.
Maybe Claire or Ludi, do you want to explain in your words what venture capital is from maybe a research scientist perspective?
Yeah, I don't know if it's from a research scientist perspective, but the answer that I wrote out for this one was that, like, very simply, VC is buying small parts of very early stage, very high potential companies. And I think everything that's been said right now, like already, it's absolutely true. A lot of it is based on relationship. A lot of it is based on mission. And I think the dominant narrative is, like, in your first couple of years in VC, it's just invest in good people. And then you get caught up in the metrics and in the analysis and in multiples and so specifically revenue multiples over the, potential valuation and all of that. And you start to get really caught up in it. And then 10 years down the track, apparently you just come back to just invest in good people. And for us at Blackbird, the mandate is we invest in wild hearts with the wildest of ambitions right at the very beginning. And I think that there is a consistency in the character and scale and clarity of ambition in every person that we invest in. And ultimately what you're trying to do is really sort out from the 1,600 plus deals that we see in a year, who amongst it is going to become, is going to take as big a bite of a really big challenging problem that will create a company that is exponentiating for decades to come. That's what we're looking for. So there's scale of ambition and of outcomes. And I think that for us, that comes down to a depth of character and strength there.
Wow. And Ludi, do you want to finish us off?
I think +1 on what everyone said, depending on what firm you're at and what growth stage you're at, it's going to vary. Like for us at Galileo, team is so important because that 0 to 1 phase is quite hard to get off the ground. So team and vision. But yeah.
Perfect. And so that kind of segues into my next question, which are what are the steps involved in doing a deal? So would Abhi, you'd like to start off tonight?
Oh, I think going back to what I said before, it's really, really getting to know someone. That's getting coffees with them, meeting them over time, really understanding what makes them tick, who they are as a person, and sort of what their ambition is, what they truly want to do. You sort of want to back someone who's doing their life's work and sort of going after a big problem. So really understanding what makes them tick is probably core to getting a deal done, to be honest. There's a bunch of other boring stuff, but I think that's the most important part.
Does anyone have anything to add on from that?
I think the process actually starts at the relationship in very early days. So for example, with Relevance and James at Galileo, they knew each other when, Dan was quite young. And then it wasn't until he started Relevance and then we decided to invest in them. But yeah, that relationship aspect and that early deal flow is so important. And then there's the other stuff.
If I can jump off that, Ludi, I think it's absolutely right. And the relationship goes both ways. So a good portion of the deal, and I think that this is increasingly understood by founders, but maybe not in the Australian space as much, is assessing the investor for whether or not they're someone that you would trust to have a part of your company. Because as much as VC is about giving capital and it's about, really injecting capital and belief and supercharging the first stage of companies or the early stages, it is also very much about trusting investors with a part of your life's work potentially. And so the relationship goes both ways. And that, at least I have found, is a very good portion of doing deals and of winning deals in particular in VC.
I guess the only thing I'd add, because you all covered it so well at the front stage of that whole journey, is that as a VC, we also stay involved post-investment. So especially any VC, you want to know that they're going to step in and help when maybe you need help on a certain strategy, or you just want to float something and they're there to help you. So we spend a lot of time on portfolio management.
Awesome. That sort of leads us into our next question, which you sort of touched on parts of sort of balancing financials, but also having a lot of founder empathy and why that's really important, more than people would imagine. Is there any other qualities that make a great venture capitalist, or what skills should aspiring venture capitalists try to develop?
One thing that'd be helpful to do is to make sure you can develop conviction relatively quickly. And no, it doesn't have to be right, and you need to make sure that you can be proven wrong when you go down a track, you meet the founder and you learn something new. But it's quite important, I guess, to be able to, once you see a deck or you do a first meeting, to come with a quick initial view that you can present. So, and as I said, to be humble and be able to change that quickly. But I think that's one skill that your seniors will be looking from you. What did you think about this company? Did you like it? What are the key points that are really interesting? So coming up with that.
Awesome. Did you have anything to add into that, Abhi?
I think Sally actually answered it pretty well. I think it's sort of being open to change. I mean, you sort of get pitched ideas every day that challenge the norm, right? And humans aren't actually good at thinking outside of the box, or sort of thinking outside of the norm, to be honest. And so you have to have like a super open mind to a lot of things, and be ready to be challenged. Like that's my day in, day out. And you know, it's pretty fun, but it's also like, you know, pretty tricky to navigate, and you sort of have to have some mental clarity there as well, I think.
I think, like, to add, I mean, all curiosity by far, because you're going to be looking at a lot of different industries and they're all very interesting. And if that's not something that interests you, then it'll be hard. Another thing is just like intellectual and emotional stamina, and also like a healthy balance. Were you going to ask what stamina?
No, I think that's such a good one. Such a good one.
Yeah, in the sense of there's a lot of research, there's a lot of like emotional stuff that you're taking in from founders as well as they go through their really hard times, and then also being able to switch in between. And this is something that I'm still sort of like learning to get better at, when we have like back-to-back meetings of like pitches, and then also having to like switch to portfolio support. Yeah, it's a very different skill.
I think the stamina one is so important. It in the suggestions for this question, you mentioned building empathy, and I think that that's absolutely true. Having, like, as a VC, it's very easy to build ego and to get cocky and to talk about adding value and making deals sort of about you. But ultimately, I think what I found in my limited time in the space is that I think humility, being able to step back from that, building empathy, understanding that the work that you do is never as hard as the work that a founder will do, and the pressure that is on you is never as much as the pressure that is on founders, is super important. Within that, you need to have the ability to build trust, and to step back from that when that's like, to step back from situations when that's actually needed. Having a clarity of thought and your ability to hone right down to the very basis of the decisions that you're making and be crystal clear in the reasons for why you are actually deciding things, whether that be to invest or not invest, or whether you are giving advice as part of a board. That precision thinking is incredibly important, and I've seen it, I think, in some of the best VCs that I've seen so far. And then the other one that I had here is a little bit of a weird one, but one thing that I love about Blackbird is our ability to, like, we work on the basis of really unmeasured generosity and hospitality. And I think that I think it again comes down to a humility side of things. Once again, like, I think the VC role, for the competition that is inherent in it, is inherently a service role. It's actually 100% about loving and serving founders more than anything else. All of those are a little bit weird, but I +1 on absolutely everything that everyone else has said too. Yeah.
Awesome. There's some really great insights from that. So the next one is, we've done a little bit of research, but into sort of like your different sort of backgrounds and current interests. But what are some current up and coming developing sort of industries or verticals you see becoming really important? So we've sort of noted here that that you, Claire, are pretty interested in sort of like deep tech with your sort of heavy science background. Is there any sort of verticals or things up and coming you're really excited about?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think the two that I'm really fascinated by right now, there's actually a few. First of all, increasingly, like, digital therapeutics and health tech in an area that is, you know, not traditionally med tech or not, you know, traditional therapeutics. To be fair, Blackbird has like stayed very far away from traditional therapeutics and life sciences, but the potential increasingly for digital or software solutions to enter into that therapeutics or support space for us is really fascinating. And I'm interested to see, you know, between companies like, I don't know, human health, turn to even, there's one in Melbourne right now, it's called More Good Days. All of these, that are coming together and telling increasingly, these are all really for chronic conditions, but telling really interesting stories in that space and pushing the boundaries of what software can do is super interesting. Aside from that, I'm super fascinated by synthetic biology. I think my background is in chemistry and maths and quantum computing a little bit, but I do think that slightly weird opinion is that it's going to be increasingly easy to spin up synthetic biology companies. And like synthetic biology and biohacking will be for the next sort of 20 years what software development has been for the past 20 years, and will develop in that way and in that kind of ease. So I'm really fascinated to see what emerges out of that. Less so sort of the big ones that have SPAC'd recently, and more so the smaller synthetic biology manufacturing kind of companies that are coming up. I don't think anyone's quite cracked it, but it's pretty funky and fun.
Awesome. I think, Sally, you're really into femtech and Web3. Is there any things in particular you're really excited about?
Yep, as mentioned, I'm very interested in Web3. So we have a digital assets fund. So I mainly actually work out of that at the moment. I do our core fund as well. There's a few different spaces I'm interested in, but as a whole, I guess it's just giving the power back to the individual. If any of you have played with crypto and you try out a DeFi app and you can so quickly do a transaction, the fees are so much lower, you can earn higher yields. I think it's really interesting. It's also other things like privacy and data and bringing that back to the individual. For example, rather than, us watching ads on YouTube, why aren't they, compensating us as well for the minutes we're watching? So there's really interesting things from the watch to earn, play to earn, walk to earn, whatever it is. So I think that's a really interesting model. And then on the women's side, let's bring it back to Web3. I think it's a really big problem. As we all know, the finance sector is already in some ways male dominated. So is technology, that's male dominated. Then you put them all together into the crypto, especially DeFi, and the amount of women there really, really dwindles. So really interested to see what really good education platforms come up. So there've been really awesome NFT projects that encourage women and other minorities into the space. There's been really interesting DAOs that teach people how to develop things or learn more about crypto. So I'm really keen about those as well.
Awesome. And then I think, Abhi, you're pretty into Web3 as well. Is there any sort of particular verticals or industries you're really excited about?
I might not take the Web3 angle for this one. I think there's more to the world than Web3 as well, right? But for me, what I'm really, getting feedback. Yeah, I mean, for me, what I'm really interested in is I think kind of going to Claire's answer around health tech, but more so on the operational difficulties with health tech. I think there are a lot of inefficiencies in the space, especially in hospital networks and with GPs and that sort of thing. And there's a slow rate of digitization that I've seen, having talked to founders and that sort of thing in Australia. And so I think we need to encourage more healthcare professionals to sort of enter the world of startups, and communities like What the Health are sort of pioneering in that space in Oz. And so yeah, I think that stuff's really underrated and yeah, a big space and a big opportunity for people to push into. Yeah, I can give you a Web3 answer if you want, but I think that health tech stuff is more interesting.
I'm in the same boat there. Well, how about you, Liddy? Anything you're really interested about?
So I think just from one of our recent investment with Lumi, the gaming industry, I've never really been into it before, but just geeking out on it recently, and finding out that Animal Crossing, for example, had 65% of female downloads. And I think that diversity in the gaming industry will be really interesting, and what sort of games come out of that now. And right now, there's only 30% of women in the gaming industry. And just chatting to the founders at Lumi and understanding the whole ecosystem there, it's, like I said, it's quite interesting and crazy that hasn't quite developed as much yet. So yeah, that's what I'm looking out for.
All right, I'll take over for a bit. And my question is, are there any company programs or internships that you'd recommend for students to engage with while in university? So maybe Claire, would you like to start off with Blackbird's opportunities?
Yeah, for the record, I mean, this is being pointed to me because Blackbird is the sister company of StartMate, and StartMate runs a whole suite of programs for this. Too many for me to really name, but StartMate, you know, they have accelerators, they have amazing fellowships. They have a general student fellowship, which I've heard is like a life-changing experience and is really phenomenal. I think so. Cam Ensor runs that, and from students who have participated in it right through their parents, we sometimes get info from, which is quite funny if you're a university student. They speak incredibly highly of it. So anything that gives you that kind of, I think, first of all, bolt of ambition and the frameworks through which to plan careers and find meaning in the work that you do. And then also those that I guess really allow you to connect with the context of many other people and the space that you are thinking about maybe working in, and giving you the visibility over the potential for you are certainly the things that at university I would be looking for. I myself found that I was really lacking the context and visibility over the broad range of opportunities that would be there for me. So StartMate fellowships, have to plug it. I do, you know, I run a program called Wild Futures, which is a startup ideas competition. And that's a little different. It's a little more rigorous, but if you have a very, I think, wacky idea, there's literally, I think, nothing better than reaching out and trying to actually act on it, whether that be through a program like Wild Futures or any other sort of pre-accelerator, or whether it's actually just connecting with someone and asking for advice. I would highly recommend that you have a stab at that. The other ones that I actually really want to plug because they were incredibly important to me are Ripple's programs. Ripple is not the cryptocurrency, but it's a youth empowerment organization based in Australia, but specifically Sydney. They're mainly focused around leadership and civics and impact and building careers that have meaning and impact involved in them or embedded in them. And I cannot speak highly enough of Sky Briggs and Tim Middlemiss who run those. I think that they give you a deep understanding of what impact actually means and the potential to be connected in with absolutely amazing networks and communities. And the Ripple Emerging Civic Leaders program for me was phenomenal. Highly recommend it. Thanks, Felix. Someone put the link in there.
Does anyone else want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think. Oh, go, Liddy, go.
I mean, aside from like programs, you've also got like a lot of communities within the startup ecosystem, like early work, for example. If you're like interested in the startup operator space, they now have community around that and helping people get into like other like bigger tech companies and getting that experience. Yeah, I think for startups specifically, and then alternatively, like for VC, there's a lot of internships out there for it now that there's a lot more money in funds and can take on more.
All right, and anything university specific that someone might benefit from, or any kind of things that you did at university that really helped you get into the startup space, apart from something like Textbook Ventures?
I'm probably the wrong person to answer this because I dropped out of uni.
No problem. Is there anyone else that would like to answer that one, or should we just move on to the next question?
Yeah, happy to. I think there are a lot more startup focused events at unis, if I'm not mistaken. I've sort of seen a bunch pop up, and you know, Textbook Ventures is obviously a really good one, but there's also others out there, so like keep your eyes peeled. And I think a really important piece of advice I'd give is like when you're at uni, just be proactive with everything. I think, you know, like this is probably something that I should have done when I was at uni, but I think cold DMing people, just going to events, going to meetups, wherever you can sort of meet like-minded people is always a good thing to do. And I think what's actually underrated here in Oz is like getting on Twitter, and people are a lot more accessible on Twitter than LinkedIn. And so, yeah, I think that's like the biggest piece of advice that I'd give anyone is like, you can reach absolutely anyone on Twitter. And I guarantee you they get less DMs on Twitter than on LinkedIn. And so if you want them to respond, DM them on Twitter.
You can also ask for connections. I completely like +1 to everything that Abhi has said. Just talk to people, just ask. Like if they don't have time, the worst thing that they'll say is no. Or not respond, which I sometimes don't because I'm very bad at comms. But for the most part, people are actually, I think, very generous and very happy to just chat, talk, offer advice, listen to everything that you want. Don't waste people's time, obviously, but absolutely +1 to the idea of being proactive and having real agency in the situation.
Sally, do you want to add anything onto that, or?
Yes, I was going to say, don't worry about how far you get, but I'd encourage you to look at any hackathons or those competitions that the different societies run. I wish I did more of them. I was a bit shy, be like, oh, I don't really know what to do. But you meet such a fun team, you spend time with them, and it also develops some really key skills in terms of how do you present? How do I think about a problem really quickly? And some of them are kind of startup focused where, they give you a startup problem and you solve it. So I think it's a fun way to see if it's something that interests you. So definitely take part in the uni society ones.
That kind of segues into my next question, which is, imagine you're about to graduate university and enter the workforce in 2022. What direction would you take and what would you do differently knowing what you know now?
Okay, can I jump in on this one? Sorry, Abby. So I left uni, I took 6 months of doing very little casual work, living off savings and job seeker at the time. And it was a pretty rough time. I was applying for scholarships and I felt like I needed a 10-year plan ahead of me. And then I was offered a job at Deadly Science. And as a job, there was literally zero structure. And there was every expectation that I should just learn how to do absolutely everything. And I don't regret that. But what I would say is now I would find a role that fit me in terms of there was a large amount of independence, but the upper level support and guard railing to allow me to build to whatever stage I felt comfortable with and have, potentially limitless potential. But was also, supportive, that measure of both. That might look like just doing something and just starting something. And I do think that that's something that I don't regret now, but it's something that I'm thinking about starting up again. Starting a project, actually making something and putting it out there, whether that's writing or making or coding or working with groups, building up a community, whatever it is. I put it in the chat that one of the motto that we were toying with at our last offsite was just do something. And that's something that I would recommend to any new graduate or someone who's still in university, stop waiting for the structures to align and actually just make something.
Yeah, I think that was pretty good advice, Claire. And sort of aligns with just being more proactive with everything you do. I think an interesting way to think about it is think about your own context. I think some people are more predisposed to taking on risk earlier in their journeys, and some have the privilege to do so as well, right? Maybe you might have to pay rent, or you're living at home, and people's situations are different. So contextually think about it and don't look at other people's journeys into things. I think you sort of got to focus on what you're doing. And I think it's important to think about what the opportunity will get you. So I think an easy way of sort of getting a lot of experience is continually doing internships, 3-month stints at different places. You'll understand what you like, you'll understand what you don't like, and you can sort of steer your career that way. So if I had my time again at uni, I'd probably do that. I have a few friends doing that at the moment. They're just bouncing around to different internships, and I think it's sort of given them a really good view of what the world looks like. And yeah, so think about your own context, think about your own interests, and just be proactive, I think.
Abby, did anybody tell you to experiment in your 20s?
Yeah, a few people. I was probably a bit stiff at uni, but yeah, experimenting now.
Me too. I think that was the best advice that I received early on. I think I was also pretty stiff at uni and felt like I had to have a path planned out. But the idea of being able to experiment, take on a bunch of internships, if you walk through an open door, it doesn't close all of the other doors for you at this point in time, and you should really embrace that. That's something that I've valued.
And just one random piece of, I don't know, a tactic maybe is if you're someone who is really desperate, is really desperate for a job or needs that financial security, I think try and secure something. Like it doesn't matter what it is, but just secure something so you personally have the sense of security to go out and do what you want. So if you get a grad job or something, you can always ask to defer it. I think it's like a job seekers market at the moment. So you can always ask to defer things 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And during that period of time, go and do what you want. If you want to go travel, go and do that with the security that you've got a job lined up. If you want to go work for some random startup that's literally just starting, then go and do that as well. Like you've got so much security that you can afford to do that. So I think for people who are not as privileged as I was, I think that's a pretty underrated tip as well.
So before we go to Q&A at the end, we're just going to do like a quick fun, like quick fire things. There's 4 questions and just try and keep your answers to like 1 line per question. We might start off with Ludi first. So what's your favorite startup and why?
Oh, this is actually it's a sex tech startup in the female founders like portfolios. Oh, sorry. Yeah, female founders. It's called Karma. And it's essentially just teaches people how to like communicate effectively about their needs. They just do it in a really like beautiful way, and it like there's no stigma around that. So yeah, take a look if you're interested.
What's one skill you're hoping to develop?
One skill I'm hoping to develop. I would say on that emotional, intellectual stamina. Yeah. I think getting better at that would be make my job a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. Which industry would you like to learn more about?
Probably a few more deep tech stuff because I've been so consumer focused. And so I need to hang out with Claire a bit more.
So then the last one, just any book or podcast recommendations?
I loved when I first started in VC, I loved 20-minute VC because it was just so good. They were like rapid fire, like short talks about like different investor experience and operator experience and like growing companies and scaling them. So that's a really good one. What was the other one? A book?
A book or podcast or both?
A book. I would say this one is for the ladies out there. Women Who Run with Wolves. That's a good one for like alpha females, or just if you're feeling stuck and how to sort of like navigate through life. Yeah, it's a good one.
Very cool. Sally, what's your favorite startup and why?
My favorite startup is Splash. So it's a DJing game on Roblox, and people hang out in nightclubs, they roller skate together. I think it's just really fun, and actually the AI tools are really interesting as well, so it's exciting to me.
Awesome. What's one skill you're hoping to develop?
I want to learn how to code properly.
What's an industry you would like to learn more about?
Someone hit up Claire, but I used to have an interest in biology as a favorite subject, so I really want to get deeper in biotech.
Same with me as well in high school. And then the last one's any book or podcast recommendations or both?
I'm going to take a bit different. I really encourage you to test out Twitter Spaces. People talk about really interesting things and they just pop up there all the time. So have a play on Twitter and you'll be surprised what you find.
Awesome. Then Abhi, what's your favorite startup and why?
I think it'd be a Folklore portfolio company called Swoop Arrow. They're fully autonomous drones. Main function is sort of delivering like vaccines and medicines to rural parts of the world. So they did a COVID vaccine rollout over in Malawi. They've done stuff in Vanuatu. It's an amazing company.
Awesome. What's one skill you're hoping to develop?
I think just like continually refining my ability to think clearly and just talk clearly as well.
What's an industry you'd like to learn more about?
Common theme to this answer is, health tech and medicine. I think we're all hitting up Claire after this one.
And then lastly, any book or podcast recommendations?
Favorite podcast is the Quiet Podcast. 3-hour long episodes about a company's journey is just something that I nerd out about. I don't know if that's sad or yeah. And then favorite book is probably Poor Charlie's Almanac. Just yeah, timeless.
Awesome. And then Claire, what's your favorite startup and why?
Okay, this one was a real challenge for me because my actual favorite startup is one that we've invested in but not announced. And so I can't say that. So I'm going to say that my favorite startup is Vow because I adore Vow. They are doing cultured meat, but they are doing cultured meat differently. And I think that the founders of Vow are just absolutely amazing. They're like, why, if you could culture meat, why would you make chicken? Which I think is fair because it's pretty boring. And I love that they have brought together the most amazing technical team and they continue to hit technical milestones that are just absolutely phenomenal. And I think that they represent to me, they are the epitome of a creative mission in high definition of vivid color and just the most phenomenal ambition. And I love seeing every step that they take.
Fantastic. And then what's a skill you're hoping to develop?
Yeah, so with work, I'm working on my ability to think clearly and express myself clearly, and that comes through with long form writing and actually putting my thoughts down. But the more fun one that I'm working on is I really want to develop like electrical tinkering skills. You know how some people can build little devices and things like that? I really want to be able to do that.
Awesome. And then what's an industry you'd like to learn more about?
Yeah, I actually also put down biotech, guys, so I don't really know. What do you think? That
the blind leading the blind.
But you know, we are thinking about starting to run some deep tech community events, so maybe we can all figure it out together. But yeah, biotech and SynBio in particular.
Fantastic. Then lastly, any book or podcast recommendations?
Yeah, so sacrilege here is that I don't actually really like podcasts. I'm not much of an auditory learner, and I know that that's really offensive in the startup space. So I'll say the Wild Hearts podcast because that's what I have to say, and it is very good from what I've heard. But I am an avid reader. I think that you should read widely and deeply. My book recommendations. Middlemarch, which is it's a Victorian novel. I absolutely adore it. It's not for everyone, but it was super important for me. I've got the Essays of Warren Buffett here, which is the collections of letters from Berkshire Hathaway, which is a great. They're
actually great. Like they're good read if you're upcoming in VC too.
They're amazing, and I think Poor Charlie's Almanac is phenomenal as well. Like it's actually a good pairing there. And then the other one is anything that Robert Sapolsky has written or spoken about. I highly recommend. It's just a fun time. Yeah, that's a selection of, it's a weird selection, but I highly recommend. Oh, I recently read Unwell Women, and I highly recommend it. It's about the history of women's medicine and women's health and the way that women have been underserved in medicine. And it's a bit of a hard read, but it's very good.
Awesome. And now I'll probably open the floor up for Q&A for the last few minutes. I might start with like the sort of top one in the slider link at the moment. So if you guys have any more questions, just sort of submit them or upvote ones you really like. And the first one is, how do outsiders or minorities or underrepresented founders get intros or access to venture capital?
I think DM me with whatever questions you have, whatever you want to do. Happy to take a look.
Yeah, I think, like we've all mentioned, it's all about community. So like jump on Twitter, follow VCs, DM them, take a look at all the different personalities in VC by like checking out the team pages. Everyone's quite open to have a chat.
Yes, to add to Abby's point, maybe sometimes it's helpful to reach to people like us who are the associates, and we come from pretty diverse backgrounds, and we, really want to help you as well. We're also now journey as a VC. Sometimes I think people think, oh no, maybe only a partner can help you, but sometimes going to the people who are doing the research and look at these every day might be able to offer you some advice, and we can also personally relate to you as well.
Yeah, I think that it actually speaks to the second question or the third question on the Slido, which is how to approach a VC. I think you find people who relate to the work that you're doing or relate to you in a fund whose mission relates to you, and you start there. That's, I think, the best place to start. There is, you know, warm intros are great, but honestly, they're a little archaic. You can just reach out and people will be friendly. Yeah. And if they're not, you should dob them in.
That's a red flag.
For sure. And the next one is, what are the top 3 things you look for when evaluating a startup?
I think maybe always people. Like I've sort of been saying throughout, it's just like always the founders, always the key team members, getting to know them. I think probably just sort of ensuring that the problem actually exists, and then ensuring that the solution accurately solves the problem in a high quality manner as well. It's just going back to like, what is the core business model and what is the core product, and ensuring that that actively targets the problem that the founders are trying to solve.
Yeah, +1 to people. I think people is always the number one, because the business will change, the people will not. And maybe you can unlock something in them and you can, you know, give them the best advisors and develop them and grow them. But ultimately, that caliber of a person, like they've got to be someone that you want to work with for the next 10 years of your life. And that's no small thing. It's also got to be someone that you trust with your reputation and the reputation of your fund for the next 10 years. That's huge. So people, I think that when within that though, what I am learning is that you don't necessarily just want people who are sort of broadly pretty good across many things. What we've seen is that some of the strongest founders today, especially in the Australian space, are those who really over-index on a particular skill. So the example is like Tim Doyle really over-indexed on like marketing and sales. Whereas someone like Benjamin Humphrey at Dovetail, so Tim Doyle is Eucalyptus, Benjamin Humphrey at Dovetail really over-indexed on like product and insight into product and customer love and what it actually takes to build just an absolutely beautiful SaaS product. That's what you want, someone who has like an incredible skill and insight in a particular area. And then I guess finally the thing is, does this company, do these people have a unique way of looking at the world that will fundamentally change the user experience, or fundamentally like have this step change in quality of life, or in the way that we're solving a particular problem? That's the kind of thing that you want to look for. It's never incremental. It needs to be something very fundamental.
The next question is on views on the best way to approach a VC. So just because Abhi mentioned DMs, so is LinkedIn the best platform, or should we just be sending cold emails? What's the strategy?
I think this also depends on the VC. I mean, you could definitely try. Some VCs are mostly on Twitter, others like on LinkedIn. I think I'm just like similar to Abhi, as in like you could DM me on any platform and I'd still answer your question.
Yeah.
But also like quality, like time is a VC's love language, so don't like waste their time. And just get straight to the point. That's totally fine. Like we can get to know you still too.
Be very direct, give really, like if you have a call to action, if you have something that you actually want, then you should put that in the email, like standard email etiquette, right? Don't just ramble on for 3 pages and then just send kind of thoughts for a while. If you want a meeting, ask for a meeting. If you want to go out for coffee, if it's social, ask for that. That's completely fine. The other one that's really important is make sure that you're approaching the right person and that it's actually not like a cold form email. We get a lot of those, and especially through like web forms and web inputs, you get a lot of just like copy paste emails. That's not actually going to get you anywhere. As Liddy said, like time is our love language, and everyone is very busy. And if there is the sense that you are doing this because you think that there is like an entitlement side of things, or you've emailed, 100 VCs across the world, then I think that's not going to get you very far. So personability, being really clear, being concise, and actually having a very clear call to action on the end.
I think all of that is pretty good. I mean, personally, I don't really have a preference on how you reach out to me, or in like whatever form it is. Like, write me an essay. I'd love to read it. I think one of the underrated things is probably asking your questions in an email and receiving a response asynchronously without a meeting. I think people are probably more likely to take a few minutes out of the day to sort of write you a really comprehensive response if you detail out, like, 3 or 4 questions or whatever it is. But yeah, personally, I love meeting people, so happy to do anything.
I think it's also a bit different, as I think Claire mentioned, if you're reaching out from, let's say you're a student trying to get a job, or you just really want to connect on a social level, then I'd say, keep it short and sweet and let me know you want to catch up for a coffee or a Zoom, and maybe something that's relatable. Maybe you went to the same uni, maybe we like the same book, whatever it is, like something small is kind of nice, but either way, we'll still chat to you. Then on the, I guess if it's a startup company that you're trying to pitch, I think it's really helpful when people include a link to, like, even if it's a 1 or 2 page deck, or if you already have a deck, something like that. So, we can really quickly get to know each other, and, I can let you know up front, is it something that I'm interested in? It's not compulsory, but it's helpful as well if that's what you're after.
All right, so unfortunately, in interest of time, we are going to have to close up, but you can find our panelists on LinkedIn and Twitter. And you can also check out their respective venture capital and portfolio company career pages. You can find us, so Textbook Ventures, on our socials. Feel free to subscribe to our newsletter and join our community as well. And we do have an incredible lineup of similar events coming up in the next few months, and a link tree for all our Textbook Venture links will also be posted in the chat below. So thank you for coming on a Thursday night and hanging out with us for the last hour, and hope to see you at more events.